Part 5 of the Praga rebuild, and today we'll assemble the valve gear and put the intake tubes on. Despite my avowed promise to work on it all week and film as I go, it's actually Saturday afternoon and I've done nothing so far. Still working on the honeydew, which is taking a bit of time, and had to mend the ride-on mower and a whole load of other things that came up this week. Anyway, let's get on with it. Each rocker looks like this and has a small ball race on the outside. There's also a spacer that goes in the middle, which I'm just going to leave out for a moment. And then there's a washer on the outside as well on each side. And then this pin goes through here and holds the whole lot in place with a nut on the end. Actually putting it together isn't very easy because the little bush that goes in the middle here can float around rather a lot. So having had to think about it, I've made a bullet to push through first. So we're going to assemble the whole lot. There goes a ball bearing on the floor. Assemble the whole lot and then push the bullet through from the outside inwards and try and line everything up as we go. So here's the bullet. I made it in the lathe. Bashed my head on the aeronca fuselage a few times as I did so. So it's got a long taper on it and it's just a nice push fit through. Now, you're probably wondering about the aeronca valve gear. Well, of course, it's a little different because the cylinders have parallel valves, so they have one valve chest. But a very important thing I found, this is an old rocker shaft that I use for lining up aeronca rockers. They're much easier to do on the aeronca. There's also a bushing in the heads here, so it's much harder to damage anything. I just ground a taper on this. I've got boxes of these things. You can see those are the two holes for the grease to come out from the grease nipple at the end here when you grease the valve gear. Of course, the best discovery was that the ball bearings or ball races that are in the aeronca rockers are the same as in the Praga engine, and thus this bullet also fits through, and it's a really nice ground finished fit through the whole lot. So if I use this bullet first to line everything up roughly, and then this one to line it up pretty exactly, and hopefully I can remove this and push the pin through and everything will go together as it should. Rather a lot of hopefully attached to it. And of course, after the walloping of the blasted gudgeon pins last week, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we'll find out. One important thing we need to ascertain before we start assembling the valve gear is the position of the cam. Effectively, we want to position the crankshaft so the piston's at top dead center on the firing stroke, so we don't have any push rod up. We want the push rods to be down as far as possible. So I'll put two push rods in and take the plugs out. After I finished last week, I did put plugs in the holes. I also sprayed quite a lot of duck oil in just to soak around the rings and everything. Of course, it's a shame this spray oil wasn't around in 1939. It probably would have preserved the engine a bit better. Let's all see whether... Okay. Somewhere down the ball there. Put that down. This will tent peg. Right. I'm going to rotate the crankshaft in the direction of rotation. And what's going on here as let's see if we're top or bottom dead center. Okay, bottom dead center at the moment. And I can feel the exhaust valve opening here because this push rod's coming out. But if I do nothing, that doesn't come out anymore. You can tell when the engine's at the top center because the pistons aren't moving. It's much easier to turn the crank if you're not sort of fighting new piston rings. So now the exhaust valve has just closed and the inlet is opening. So that cylinder on the other side is actually at top dead center on the firing stroke. So we need to go through another 360 degrees. So there, if I check TDC again with my, yep, there we are, top dead center. So we're on the firing stroke here, and the push rods go back in a nice long way, so we can now put the valve gear on. So we'll start off with a bull race in one side, and then the spacer, and you can see the spacer just floats around. It'd be helpful if it was machined with an outside diameter just a little less than the inside of that cavity, and then it wouldn't float around so much. Other bull race. Then there's a washer that goes on the outside on each side. They're very thin washers. 1, 2. Then I have to find something to gently bash it into the gap with. So it will go in like so. Okay. Go in by hand and make sure that it's picking up the push rod at the bottom, which it is. Good. Right, let's find the first bullet. I'm going to grease the bullet as well. Give everything a good fighting chance. To rub it with grease, and then hopefully it won't pick up on the aluminium at all as it goes through. Work it through by hand first if I can, pushing that little aluminium spacer out of the way. I better go and find a hammer. Well, that's gone in nicely. Good. It was worth making that bullet. Now let's use the aeronca shaped bullet. Now, just a little question, do I go out or in? Because I want to push the pin in. So I wonder if I can carefully push this through in this way. I reckon I can. Will this go through, or will it? Just make sure it misses the other head. It would be helpful if it went through this way. Yes, it does. So after that gudgeon pins last week, I've been terribly wary about all this. Now that ought to come out. Just misses the head there, as long as the hex is in the right position. And pin. I know it's a sort of metal to metal thing, but don't want any corrosion. Corrosion's been an issue with this engine all the way through. There's no greaser on the end here, of course, because this thing drips oil. So I think I'll give it a little squirt with an oil can before it's all finally closed up. Anyway, I'll put the little pin in and some very gentle persuasion. Hopefully nothing will move. Bingo! Now, of course, that may have just been beginner's luck, so let's try the second one. I did label all these. They are the correct ones. They didn't all get thrown in a pot. I didn't clean them at the time. In fact, that's something I did do during the week, as well as making the bullet, was clean all the bits up here. That washer has come out a little way. I'm going to very gently persuade it inwards. I wonder if those washers are actually slightly dished. They don't appear to be by eye, but I wonder if they've become slightly dished over time. Let's persuade that in a tiny bit more. I don't want to raise a burr on anything. Let's see if the bullet will go in. Yes, it does, all the way through. Good. Yes. Just double checking. Yes, I did put a push rod in there. So this is the aeronca pin again. through, I think, as far as it needs to be. Yes, I'm sure it is, but a little bit for luck. Right, see if we can pull it out again. Some water pump pliers here. Let's use those to give it a wiggle. Once again, I'm just greasing this pin up a little bit, hopefully. Excellent. I thought I'd be really smart and adjust the valve clearances. This is the aeronca spanner. Look at that, drilled for added lightness. It comes out the Llewellyn bag, but it doesn't fit. These valve chests are much tighter around here than the obviously much more open square shaped aeronca valve chest, so I'm going to have to go and find something else. Well, I found a socket that fits, so I reckon a good bit of bodgery with a socket, a pair of water pump pliers and screwdriver will allow me to adjust the valve clearances enough to start off with. So, is it going to work? Yes. Now the valve clearances are not very tight, not very loose rather. They're very tight on the aeronca. In fact, I run them wider than the book says. I can't even remember what the book fitting setting is, but it's too tight in my opinion. I like a little bit of a rattle, just a little bit, I don't know, 15 thou, something like that. I don't see any point in having them really tight and a valve not sitting in its seat properly, with the attendant risk of actually burning a valve. To my mind, that's just silly. Right, let's hold that, do it up if we can. I think I'm going to have to make a spanner. This is a bit hopeless. I think I'll have to sacrifice this socket. In fact, my arc welder is outside because I sat on a stool in the kitchen last night, probably a stool from the Swedish meatball company or something, and with my fat ass I promptly broke the top off it. It was one of those ones you spin around and round to adjust the height. So I welded it together this afternoon. My welding was better than the original. So I think I might just go and weld a stick on this, make the job a lot easier. Well, there we are. She ain't pretty, but she fits, which is what matters most. So let's do that one up. Bit of a rattle, that's good. This one needs to go up quite a way. That's there. Back her off a bit. A little bit of rattle on both. That's fine for now. After when we start the thing up, everything will bed down a bit. We can adjust it all then. Give it all a squirt of oil as well before we close it up. I can take the grease nipples out and give the valve springers a squirt of oil. And I think just for the ground running, that's exactly what I'll do. I know in the past I have fessed up to using cornflake packet or just right packets for doing the aeronca valve covers, but actually I made some out of this nice flexolite paper, flexoid paper rather. It's really good stuff. I can't tell you how impressed I am with it, or can't overstate how impressed I am with it. It's really super stuff. And I noticed the aeronca C2 engine, which has got lots of gaskets made from that, is a lot less leaky than other aeronca engines I've done, where I've used different brands of gasket paper. These valve covers are rather nice. The screws were horrendous. They're actually 2BA, so I had some 2BA countersunk chrome screws. They look good. Terribly corroded in places though. They're made out of that strange metal our checkers of vacuum chum seem to like. So I think it's sort of compressed cheese containing high amounts of magnesium or something. Curious stuff. Anyway, another gasket for here. I've turned you around there so we can have a look at these intake tubes. Now, the intake tubes obviously run from there to there, and very nice and shiny and chrome. But I had a bit of a monkey around last night. I'd say I did nothing. That's not quite true. I came and had a bit of a mess around for today. And I found in both cases, these tubes are a little long. It's a bit of a complicated arrangement compared to the aeronca, which has a lovely cast tube that comes down here, and then a separate bolt-on Y piece, and the carburettor. It's very simple and very easy to fit. It just has some rubbers that join the two cast pipes. They're very straightforward. This, with the carburettor mounted on the sump, is a little more convoluted. It's clever, it's very nice. It came with these lovely pipes, but again, they are just too long. So fortunately, because I was out welding and generally creating forms of metallic bird excrement with my arc welder, my grinder is out as well. So I'm going to use a disc cutter, and I'm just very carefully going to take barely 1/4 of an inch off these pipes. They're really nice pipes. So I think I'll just set a disc up and cut them down a little bit and then try them again, and I think they will fit. The other thing is the pipe itself. See, it's ever so slightly tapered in the socket there, and it pushes on, but I don't have any real guidance as to what it's sealed with. I think I'll just put some silicone around there and around there, push them together and bolt them on, and the silicone will sort of harden up in a week or two. That's probably all I can do. Any suggestions on what I should do, stick them in the comments. I am all ears, just like our king. This pipe now fits. I took about 1/4 of an inch off down here. That's fine. And so now I'm going to seal it up. This pipe actually just needed about a 1/16 taking off, even maybe up to an 1/8, but I just ground away a little bit and cleaned it off. Both have been thoroughly cleaned out inside, blasted out with the air squirter and everything. So I'm going to put gunjo on them, put them on, and then we'll just bolt them up. This is the second pipe. This elbow is sort of permanently stuck on. I don't know what it's been stuck on with, but it seems to be stuck on very well. I hope it doesn't leak. Let's put this one on, see how we get on. It's very easy to have them slightly misaligned due to the sort of geometry of the pipe. And I had to wiggle that one round quite a lot to get it to sit down properly. So I hope this one is all right. I can't say I like them very much compared to the aeronca system. They're a bit of a sod. Now, we haven't made a bullseye there at all. I had this on earlier. Bloody thing. Go find something to hit it with that's not too destructive. There, that's on, and it lines up good. If it doesn't line up, then you can sort of see daylight down through the gasket gap, but there isn't, so I'll get that bolted up as well. Well, that's the main part of the motor pretty much buttoned up. I was going to put the magneto on today, but I'm not. It can go on once the thing's bolted on the test rig. Test rig is mostly assembled. We'll see that in the next film. But we need to talk about propellers. The last substantial item we need to sort out before this thing can run is a propeller. Unfortunately, an aeronca propeller won't fit. This is an aeronca hub. This is the hub that fell to Earth. It's got a PCD, pitch circle diameter, of 5 inches. I'll just do this in millimeters for clarity here. And the center is 44.47, or whatever it is, doesn't really matter. And it's a tight fit, or a push fit on the center of the propeller. So this is a Praga hub, and because of the larger crankshaft at the front, the hub has a slightly larger nose diameter, 47.23, so about 2.5 millimeters bigger, or just under 1/8 of an inch. And the PCD is 4.920 inches, or 125 millimeters. So it's 2 millimeters, or 80 thou different. So an aeronca propeller won't fit, which is a bit of a nuisance. I do have several aeronca propellers, but none of them are unairworthy, and I don't really want to butcher one by re-drilling it or boring the centre out to fit this engine. It's not going to work. The only propeller I've got that's not airworthy is this one. It's a very nice propeller, and it's got a broken tip which could be repaired. But unfortunately, it's got another fault which you might spot. I'll show you now. It's very out of balance. It's actually the propeller that came off the aeronca when the crankshaft broke. I think even with enough lead stolen off the church roof, I would never get the thing to balance again. So that's my only unairworthy propeller, and it's really too unairworthy to use, even by my standards. Of course, I could commission a propeller. There's several propeller makers in the UK. I could spend quite a lot of money I don't have on something I don't really need, quite frankly. But there's a better way. So we're going to have a short series on making a propeller. I don't know whether any of you have seen this book. Eric Clutton was an Englishman who invented the Fred. I'll try and put a picture of the Fred up in a moment. It was a sort of antidote to the dismal Vans series. Anyway, Eric also made propellers, and he wrote this book. In fact, if you're a member of EAA, like I am, you'll find an interview with Eric on the EAA Timeless Voices video series. He was a rather jolly old fellow. He only died a few years ago, aged about 7 million. I think making a propeller would be good fun. It shouldn't take very long. The book is only thin. It has a total of, well, even with lots of diagrams, 50 pages. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to take a few weeks to do. I've got lots of work coming up and other stuff. The next part of putting the Praga engine together will be to get the thing running with its propeller. I know we haven't had any aeronca action for a while, but rest assured it's going like a train. The weather's been a bit iffy recently, but I flew about a fortnight ago on the most glorious Thursday afternoon. Thanks for watching. See you soon.